you would have an employee value proposition in your organization, right? You may have 5, 6, 10 statements, right? So when you do something like active network analysis, right? By virtue of the questions that you're asking in your survey. So for example, if one of your EVPs is we provide the best employee benefits or something like that, you can ask a question in your survey saying, who do you reach out to understand your employee benefits, right? Or something on those lines. So when you ask that question, you're able to create a social network specifically around an individual EVP. And you can see who are the employees in your organization who are helping drive that alignment. Or simply speaking, are people even talking about that EVP, right? So using collaboration analysis and network analysis, you can see what is the extent of EVP alignment, right? And also when you look at the passive ONA, when you're looking at the messages that people are exchanging, using the sentiment analysis, you can also figure out corresponding to each of those EVPs, what is the sentiment? Are people happy about the way you've provided a specific value proposition? Are they unhappy? If so, who's the one who's driving that negative sentiment? And last but not the least, and this personally is something that I find quite interesting, is many of you would already be using a net promoter score, right? Which is simply speaking, you ask people to what extent they support a particular initiative or a program. And by virtue of that, as an organization, you're able to identify who are the promoters and who are the detractors in your organization. And using that, you calculate NPS. Now, the catch over there is, even if you have, say, 90% promoters and 10% detractors, it may sound like a positive picture, but it may not be the case, because if those 10% detractors are influencers in your network, in the sense that if they sit right in the middle of your network, they can do a lot more harm than the remaining 90%, right? So the ideal way of using a net promoter score is to couple that with network analysis so that you have some sort of weighted NPS. So you're acknowledging the fact that people who are detractors may have a inordinate impact. And the other perspective is, if you have people who are promoters, who are talking good about your organization, and if some of them are influencers, you should work with them a lot more proactively so that they drive a very positive and constructive conversation within the organization, right? So that's on the employee branding bit. So if you go to the next slide, so these are some of the quick references for all these topics that I've discussed so far. I can share that with you offline, and some of these are research papers which are fairly comprehensive, and you'll find it quite useful to implement it in your organization. So that's all I had from my end. So if you go to the next slide, you will find my coordinates. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out.
So I'll probably put this in the chat as well, Togy, if you're okay with it.
Sure.
But let me open up, stop the share, and I'm happy to bring up the slides if someone wants. But before we get into the open up and all, can we take a group photo? I think people will start leaving in a few minutes. So if as many of you can switch on your cameras, then we'll just take a group photo. But while we are doing that, I think we also welcome questions. While I have one question, Toji, but I'll wait for the group photo or the others. So Mary, great to see you. I think Mary is also from the AsiaHRM core committee, and thanks, Mary, for joining in. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Abby.
Thank you. So how do you find this one? And I know you wanted a copy of the slides, and I'm sure we can share a copy, but we'll have to do a little bit of cleanup or addition because we wanted to actually do a three series webinar. So we only have part of the content in this slide. But I'll check Amol and maybe share this as of now while we prepare for the others.
Actually, this is very interesting. I think, from an HR perspective, this would really help us, in building up our analytics. right, in terms of, and I especially like the NPS, because currently actually we're also working on the NPS for the net promoters. Yeah.
Wonderful. And in any format, did you get a chance to look at organization? I mean, the ONA part of it, or largely the traditional NPS?
Because actually we're using a third party for that one, so it's quite difficult. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So I think Stuart, Alan, and Angel, I'm assuming that, and Tan, I'm assuming you can't switch on your cameras. So why don't I take the first snap? I think let's smile for a moment. Thanks. So it's one down and maybe just one more. Great. So thanks everyone. So I think Togy, one of the questions that I had is, and I'm just looking at the geography slide, right, where you mentioned about two geographies, and there was one person, right, who was really the pivot of the conversations or the network, right? And I think so this is the slide I'm referring to. And the other piece also you mentioned about the leader, how the leaders really, the Karen and Amit, right, the two slides. So what let's say if we are able to find this, right, how do you think organizations can start taking some action, right, or in your experience, right, what were the recommendations that you would give in either of these scenarios, right? If you could maybe help us understand.
Right. Yeah. So there are two ways of looking at it, and thanks for asking that question, Abhi. That was a very pertinent one. There are two ways of looking at it. One is we look at it from a positive approach, where we identify folks who are in a position to drive good change, in the sense that we identify folks using a network called between-us centrality. This is one of the ONA metrics. And folks with high between-us centrality are typically in the middle of dense networks and can drive real change. So if some of these folks are the ones with, say, high NPS scores, these are folks who you can then use to drive your narrative as a leader. Now, the narrative could be around an EVP or some new program that you're creating. But the point over here is, in your organization of 1,000 people, if you want to drive a particular narrative, it may not be possible for you to reach out to those 1,000. But the moment you start quantifying and generating, say, that between-us centrality score, now suddenly you've narrowed down from 1,000 to, say, just 10 people, because these people have the highest between-us centrality, right? And you work with them to drive change. So that way, as an HR leader, you're saving your time and effort by working with a smaller group of people, but getting the same benefit. The other perspective is scenarios like this, which are slightly unfortunate, where somebody may be leaving the organization. So the moment you get a sense that someone is leaving, in addition to the typical intervention around retention, etc., you could do an analysis like this and say, how central is this person to the organization, right? And then that can help you drive a more positive or more constructive decision as to how much effort I want to put into retaining this guy. Right. So there's a positive element, and then there is a sort of a adversarial element as well to the data approach you take. But right. At a higher level, the idea is you use data to get the same effect, but with much lesser effort.
Right. Yeah, and I think the first piece, I think I completely agree. In the world of influencers, I think this is definitely something which aligns with how influencers typically drive certain behaviors or let's say influence people, not only in social media, but then also how we can do it from an organizational standpoint, right?
Exactly.
I think that's very important. Great. So I think I'll open it up. If anyone else has a question, I will stop the share for a moment and see if anyone else has a question. Okay, so I'll take that as a no. And I think we are also just on time, just 3 minutes. We'll give you back 3 minutes. So I think I've put in Toji's coordinates in the chat group. Feel free to reach out, and we will also share the deck in a slightly refined format with the AsiaHRM team, and they can share back with you. Right. So thanks everyone. Thanks for being here, and Toji, thanks once more for taking time out and doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Abhi. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.